Okay, you're live. I just need to get out of this. Sorry.
You're live now?
Yeah, you're live.
Okay. Good morning, everybody on Facebook, and welcome to the Institute for Spiritual Development in Oneonta, New York. And we are here for our Sunday service, and I will be shifting over to Renee Ranke, who will be our homilist today. And in these lovely energies of Easter and Resurrecting, her homily is called Recognizing the Human and Resurrecting the Divine. My dear soul sister.
Well, thank you, my darling. And I call him Jesus in this, so.
It's all right, I'll take it.
Okay. So today I would just love it if you would allow me to share a little bit of my spiritual journey. Now, next Sunday, it's Easter Sunday. So it seems like a fitting time for me to share with you a little bit about how I'm learning to integrate my Catholic foundation stones into my spiritual journey and how Jesus fits in as a guidepost for me. Jesus, Jesuit. Tara, she helps too. Please take anything from this that speaks to you. And by all means, anything that doesn't, leave it behind. Now, I do have a couple of readings that I'm going to use today, but before I get to them, I want to tell you guys a story. So, some of you have heard me talk about the fact that I take my dad to church occasionally, not all the time, but occasionally. And I took him to the Catholic Mass on the first Sunday of Lent. And before the service started, I was sitting there thumbing through the Missalette and checking out the readings for that day, and I immediately shuddered because the first reading for that day, one of my least favorites, from Genesis, you know, the one that blames everything on Eve, you know, that one. So I kind of sighed and shook my head when it was going to be one of those days. But then I saw what the gospel reading was, and that one is one of my favorites. It's from the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 4, verses 1 through 11. And today that's going to be the second of my two readings. And then I'm going to share with you, and I'll talk about it a little bit more about why it's my favorite one when we get there, okay? So the first reading that I want to share today is from the first book of Adam and Eve, chapter 14. Again, said God unto Adam, all this misery that thou hast been made to take upon thee because of thy transgression will not free thee from the hand of Satan, and will not save thee, but I will. When I shall come down from heaven and shall become flesh of thy seed, and take upon me the infirmity from which thou sufferest. The darkness that came upon thee in this cave shall come upon me in the grave, when I am in the flesh of thy seed. And I, who am without years, shall be subject to the reckoning of years, of times, of months, and of days. And I shall be reckoned as one of the sons of men in order to save thee. All right, second reading. And I told you what this one is. It's from the Bible, the New Testament, Matthew chapter 4, verses 1 through 11. Then Jesus was led by the Spirit into the wilderness to be tempted by the devil. After fasting 40 days and 40 nights, he was hungry. The tempter came to him and said, if you are the Son of God, tell these stones to become bread. Jesus answered, it is written, man shall not live on bread alone, but on every word that comes from the mouth of God. Then the devil took him to the holy city and had him stand on the highest point of the temple. If you are the Son of God, lost my place. If you are the Son of God, he said, throw yourself down, for it is written, he will command his angels concerning you, and they will lift you up in their hands so that you will not strike your foot upon a stone. Jesus answered, it is also written, do not put the Lord your God to the test. Again, the devil took him to a very high mountain and showed him all the kingdoms of the world and their splendor. All this I will give you, he said, if you will bow down and worship me. Jesus said to him, Away from me, Satan, for it is written, worship the Lord your God, serve him only. Then the devil left him, and angels came and attended him. That for some powerful stuff, huh? So as I mentioned, today I'm going to share with you where I am currently on my journey. I'm learning to recognize humanity and resurrect and honor divinity. Bring both of those together, like Amanda was talking about, into one picture of how I view myself and all of those around me. It's a journey. I'm not there, but I'm working on it. Now, the homily that the priest gave that first Sunday of Lent, and actually the whole theme of the Mass itself, any of you who have been Catholic or been to Catholic service may know this, it's pretty much about thinking about all of our sins and asking for forgiveness. That's the theme of Lent in the Catholic Church, penance and contemplation. After all, those sins were the reason Jesus was tortured, suffered, died. And all I kept thinking about as the priest was talking that day was, that's not what this is all about. That's just not what this is all about. And I believe at the core of my being that this journey is not meant as a punishment. That I am not berated and beholden, as Spirit once said to me, as a sinner, but instead I'm on a path of learning and discovery and appreciation for the essence that is the connection to our source in all of us. Now, I mentioned that the story of Eve and the snake in the Garden of Eden was not one of my favorites. I don't like that one. I wanted to find something that spoke to me a little bit more. Now, the book of Adam and Eve is actually believed to be the work of an unknown Egyptian author, and it's thought to have been written a few hundred years before the birth of Christ. And interestingly, if you look it up, there's actually a version of the Our Father that Jesus mentions in the New Testament. Now, the book talks about what happened to Adam and Eve after they were cast from the garden. Now, you might think I didn't actually come too far from that Genesis reading, considering the part of the reading that said, all this misery that thou hast been made to take upon thee because of thy transgression. Isn't that talking about the same thing? Hey, you sinned, so now you got to suck it up and suffer the consequences. And I thought that for a minute myself. And as I was scratching my head trying to figure out how to get beyond that without trying to find a whole nother reading to use, I was guided to look up the etymology for the word transgression. And I laughed when I found it. So the word transgression comes from Latin trans, which means cross, beyond, and gradi, meaning to walk, to go. So the Latin word transgressus means step across, step over, climb over, pass, go beyond. A little different than what we understand sin to be. So maybe I can see this human journey not as one that I was cast into for something that our whole species has done wrong, but instead as something that was meant to stretch me, to challenge me, to find a way to go beyond what I see as the difficulties of this journey and step into my true divine light. Again, another thing that Amanda was talking about, right? I love this reading because in it, God specifically says to Adam, hey, don't worry. I know this is difficult. I know it's not easy, but I'm going to come and I'm going to walk with you in this form and on this same journey that you have chosen. I mean, honestly, if there was something wrong with being human, if it was innately sinful, then when God came down to man, wouldn't he, she, they, wouldn't they have appeared as a big booming voice in the sky or a vision of divinity, not as an actual human being? What do you think? Brings me to my second reading. I told you I was going to tell you why it's one of my favorites. Because the Matthew reading actually shows the manifestation of the first reading, the Adam and Eve reading. It shows Jesus as human. I often caught myself muttering to myself in some of my more difficult times. Well, Jesus was only in the desert for 40 days and 40 nights. It feels like it's been a heck of a lot longer for me, right? But the point isn't about the amount of time, but instead it's about the fact that I can look to this reading to understand that finding my own divine strand isn't something that I just have to suffer through, because it's actually something that many of us transgress, even Jesus. And I think that's what I love the most about this reading, right? That the divine had to go through the same struggles. Now, Matthew is the first book of the New Testament, and the story of Jesus' temptation came really early in, after Jesus had been baptized by John the Baptist, but before he found his apostles, before he went on his journey, before he stepped into his actual purpose. And what it tells me is that before he could step into his purpose, he needed to visit his own human nature, battle his inner demons, if you will, right? He consciously decided to go off on his own into the desert and speak with his human side, to explain to it why he could not give in to what seemed like it might be an easier way. Basically, I believe that his encounter with the devil was actually his own human nature, tempting him to power, telling him, you don't need to suffer hunger like a human. You don't need to be hungry or thirsty or have sore feet as you're walking around. You can remain somewhere with all the luxuries that you could ever want. Go to the temple, do some parlor tricks, and they'll come to you there. Wouldn't that be a lot easier? You're powerful. Use that power to your advantage. Show them who knows best. Show them who is the king, who is God. Make them come to you. But Jesus was able to sort through that noise and set about his purpose to fulfill the promise that had been made to Adam, walking the path right alongside us as one of Adam's own descendants. Now, I often struggle with my human side while I'm trying to figure out what my purpose is. What the heck am I doing here? And to become who I'm meant to be as a spiritual being on a human journey. I also struggle to pull myself out of that Catholic mindset of sin that I was talking about a little bit earlier. You know, somehow, I have a funny story. Somehow when I was a child, the way it was all explained to me made me feel like my soul was separate from me. And I carried it around. I had this vision of this big tooth. And every time you sinned, the tooth got a cavity, right? And it would get dirtier and dirtier and dirtier unless we got those sins cleaned off. Now, I still, at the same time, believed in the tooth fairy. And I remember losing a tooth and thinking that I was going to make sure that this was the cleanest tooth anybody had ever seen before the tooth fairy got there to pick up this tooth, right? I don't know if I was still equating that tooth with my soul and the tooth fairy with God. It's entirely possible. But I wanted that tooth to be as clean as it could be. So I brushed it and I brushed it and I soaked it in toothpaste. And do you know what happened? You know what happened?
It went down the sink.
The tooth just disintegrated.
Oh,
It dissolved. It literally dissolved. So if there's some kind of cosmic lesson that my childhood self could teach my adult self, it's that what we see is our human flaws, maybe our sins. Maybe they're part of what keeps us together. That if we were perfect and shiny, maybe we would disintegrate like that tooth and no longer need to be on this journey. Why would we need to be here? Okay? So I guess that what I am learning right now is I don't always need to love the human aspects of this journey, but I do need to truly experience them, to stop thinking in terms of sin and negative, and start seeing this journey for what it's teaching me, my learning. And honestly, the more that I begin to understand this, the less I'm fighting against my human nature. And instead, I'm beginning to recognize my humanness for what it is, and to communicate with it, like Jesus did with the devil in the desert, right? Say, hey, I gotcha. I gotcha. I know this might not be so easy, and it's going to feel easier and safer to stay in this place of heaviness and fear and pain that I know and not move beyond it. But that's not exactly what we came here for, is it? After all, as difficult and dirty as being human can seem sometimes, there's such a cosmic beauty to it also. The layers and the layers of smell and sounds and feelings and sights. They can overwhelm or they can invigorate. I personally experience them both ways, but the more I can begin to see the beauty in this complete journey, then the less difficult it seems to be. And the more that I can do this in my own life, the more that I'm able to view others in that same lens. Or is it the other way around? The more that I can view others for their beauty and complexity, the more I can appreciate it in myself. Yes, it's kind of like one of those big old circles of giving and receiving, right? Who knows which way it works? I think it works both. So speaking of seeing others through the same lens, that brings me to a big one for me. A couple of months ago, I received a daily email from the Center for Action and Contemplation, that mentioned a 20th century British mystic and author named Carol Houselander. Now, it told the story of Carol traveling on a crowded subway train when suddenly she experienced a vision and saw Jesus in everyone that was on that train. And for the next several days, that vision continued. She saw Jesus in every person she encountered. And that story just resonated so strongly with me that I believe it led me to my own personal epiphany. It showed me a way to recognize divinity in all those that I encounter, and then utilize that to strengthen my own inner connection. And you know something strange? If I go back to the Bible, I can find this echoed in the stories that were written about Jesus after his resurrection. In the Gospel of John, chapter 20, verses 14 through 18, the first person that Jesus appears to after his resurrection. Anybody know? Anybody know? Mary. There you go. I knew somebody would be able to. Mary Magdalene. But she does not immediately recognize him. She thinks it's a gardener who's moved the body of Jesus. Suddenly, in that gardener, she recognizes Jesus. Gospel of Luke, chapter 14, verses 13 to 35. Two of Jesus's followers are traveling when they meet a stranger who travels with them. They walk and they talk and they share stories. Now, Jesus's followers stop and the traveler is going to continue his journey, and they say, oh, no, stay with us. Stay with us, have a meal with us. So he stays and has a meal with him. And during that meal, they suddenly recognize Jesus in the stranger. Now, somehow I had always missed this part in the resurrection story. I don't know how I did 12 years of Catholic school, but I'd always missed that. That when he rose, he didn't necessarily show himself in the form that his friends knew as Jesus. He showed himself in the form of others, showing the divinity in others. And you have no idea how big this concept has been for me. When I struggle with somebody upsetting me at work, I get a nasty email, or something in my personal life upsets me, I'm learning to step back, to breathe for a moment, and to tell myself to recognize the human, be it their actions or my own personal reaction to their actions, and then resurrect the divine. To understand that person is on a human journey also. They may not always make the choices that I think are right? It's really not my job to understand what choices are right for them anyway. It's my job to recognize for myself that they're human just like me. Recognize the human and then resurrect the divine. For me, that is seeing Jesus in them and understanding that I'm always dealing with divinity. And I don't believe how much of a difference this has actually made in my life. It only takes a moment, but that moment of seeing Jesus in someone totally tempers my reaction. My emails are kinder, my responses are gentler, and I'm beginning to be able to step through this life just a little bit more peacefully. And that is what I wanted to share with you as we head into spring and get ready for Easter. That a big part of this journey for me right now is about resurrecting my personal divinity. Slowly healing those things that the human side of me has built to cover it through the years, to hide it from me. Learning to understand that this block has never actually existed separately. This divinity is not separate from my humanity. It's only me, my fear, that created that separation. Honoring the fact that my spiritual essence is part of who I am on a daily basis. Now I just totally lost my place. Oh, right, not just on Sundays. Not just on Sundays, speaking of today. And I'm beginning to understand that to fully resurrect my divinity, I have to learn to recognize my humanity, like when I lose my place in my homily, for what it's trying to teach me about my own divine connection, right? That's what my humanity is here for, to teach me about who I am from a divine perspective. And I'm learning to see this human journey as exciting and beautiful. I think we talked about that the other day, right? And a path to finding my own personal light. But that's not all. To fully step into this resurrection theme, I need to see and understand this in others. To recognize Jesus in everyone around me. To understand that for me, Jesus is the physical manifestation of the divine, God in human form. And he is me, and he is those who have journeyed before me, all of you who journey with me now, and those who still have yet to step into this journey. And I can't fully understand that until I learn to recognize the human and resurrect the divine in those around me and ultimately within myself. That for me is what Easter is about. Raising myself up and out of seeing this human journey as muck that's holding me back, and instead seeing it as fertile earth that's lovingly feeding my divinity so that it may bloom out of the winter ground like such a beautiful Easter lily. Thank you.
Very nice. Thank you, Renee, and thank you to everybody on Facebook. And I just wanted to quickly mention the Shift Fair. That is our 17th annual Shift Fair on April 22nd and 23rd at the Holiday Inn in Oneonta. Come check us out and have a wonderful Sunday, holding that beautiful divine love within you, not just Sunday, but every day. Have a good day, everybody.